And the rabbi says, "What are you doing here?" He says, "I realized how relevant I was, how consequential I was. It's not every day I found myself in a place where my talking actually mattered. Mattered in a negative way, but it mattered. And if it mattered in a negative way, it can matter in a positive way." Okay, friends, Parshas Korach. They say that everybody has crazy in their family, and if you don't think you do, it might be you. And that is the story of this week's Parsha of Korach. Korach is Moshe's cousin. It's Moshe's crazy cousin. He's an evil cousin. And the truth is, what we soon will discover is that he might not be that crazy. He's definitely intense. He's certainly passionate. And for some reason, his passion takes him way too far because he has his own ideas. If you look at the beginning of the Parsha, just the way the Parsha opens up, and this is not the main point of what I want to discuss tonight, but I just think it's worth mentioning. It says, Vayikach Korach. Korach took, and it identifies who he is and who he teamed up with. He took the 250 men and stood up against Moshe. But it says Vayikach Korach. It doesn't say Korach commanded, Korach instructed, Korach took, which is grammatically, at least in English, doesn't make a lot of sense. And many of the commentaries grapple with what the Torah is trying to say. The way Rashi says is that he took himself out of what was socially normal. I mean, the socially normal thing is you follow Moses because he heard instruction from God and probably knows what he's doing. And Korach took himself. That's the way Rashi says. The way that Ramban, Nachmanides, explains it is that he took... He actually proves this from other places throughout the Torah, throughout the Tanakh, which I'm not equipped to share the other sources at this point because I don't remember them offhand. But apparently, when the Torah says took, it's talking about his heart. His heart took him over. His heart overtook him. Rashi is describing a behavior. The Ramban Nachmanides is describing an emotion, which makes sense because Rashi is trying to tell us the literal meaning of the verse, whereas Nachmanides tells us the more mystical, deeper meaning of the verse. So it kind of all fits. But it's describing, according to Nachmanides, an emotion. His heart took him over. He had a passion. What did he have a passion for? So number one, he had a passion for greatness. He wanted to become great. He wanted to become a Cohen. He seemed to be upset that Moshe was doing a little bit of nepotism. At least that's what it seemed like to him. Aaron is the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, representing the Jews in the holiest of times, in the holiest of services, in the Beis HaMikdash. How convenient it is that he happens to be Moshe's brother. What are the chances? How'd you land that job, buddy? Right, so he was jealous. And because of that, he lost faith in the system and led a revolt. And I think that's the simple meaning of the verse, the simple meaning of the Torah. On a very basic level, Korach was a jealous man. And jealousy can drive us to do crazy things, very illogical things. I mean, if you look at if you just think about it, it kind of, after all they've been through together with Moshe leading them out of Egypt, Moshe leading them at Mount Sinai, Moshe leading them through the desert thus far, shouldn't he kind of get that, like he kind of knows what he's doing and that he heard from God and you know, the Jews had been punished before and Moshe had pleaded for them on behalf of, like he knows that Moshe is legit. Where does this all come from? I think on a very basic level, jealousy can drive us to do really crazy things, irrational things. I was reading a talk from the Lubavitcher Rebbe where he explained, you know, we got to see the good in everybody. This guy wanted to be great. He wanted to be awesome. He wanted to be in a position of service, like Aaron. And on the surface, it was jealous. But if you look at it deeper, it was striving for greatness. That is one way to look at it. Which, by the way, imagine we saw people who, instead of seeing their problems, what we saw was a desire for something else. You know, when I work with couples, very often the nagging spouse who says, "You work so late." That might sound like jealousy. Might sound like a desire for more connection. Korach wanted something, and what he wanted wasn't that bad to want. But how he achieved it, the pathway he had chosen, was not a good thing. But I'd like to share with you another angle, perhaps, to view Korach. And I think this is going to give us a very important perspective at how we see Judaism. Korach had a real theological or philosophical challenge with Judaism, with God, with Moshe. It wasn't just jealousy. There was something much deeper. The Parsha of Korach didn't happen in a vacuum. Right? When did this happen historically? Right after the saga of the spies. Last week's Parsha, Moshe had sent 12 spies to scout the land of Israel. And their job was to see if the land is good, to see what it's like. Is it good? Is it bad? And they come back with this report saying, well, there's a lot of beautiful things about the land, but, and whenever somebody says something good and then says, but, you know what's about to happen, right? They start laying all their garbage that they've perceived. And they end up intimidating everybody, and they ended up getting in trouble. There were two spies, right? Yoshua and Kalev, who didn't take that route, who behaved themselves. So the Ramban, Nachmanides, asks an interesting question. Moshe literally said, go to the land, tell us if it's good or bad. They did what they were told. They went to the land, and they said, both, it's good and bad. They did what Moshe said. What did they do so wrong? What did they do that was bad? Moshe, so the way the Nachmanides, the Ramban puts it, is Moshe sending them to this land that is beautiful, that has bad to it as well, and he's expecting them to have Moses-like eyes, Moses-like perspective. This is a beautiful land. And it happens to have challenges. Annoying neighbors. Problem hasn't gone away, by the way, right? It has very difficult neighbors. And many of those neighbors inhabit the land at this point in time. And for political purposes, whoever might be watching this, it's not the same people. Different discussion for a different time. But the point is, they saw negativity. Moshe was certain that they were going to see the positivity. And were they to see negativity, it wasn't going to intimidate them because the positivity is there. And what happened? They got intimidated by the negativity. Whenever there is something good and there's something bad, and you truly appreciate the good, the bad is less relevant. That's usually how life works, right? I'll give you an example. Think about what you are most passionate about in life. Whatever it might be. It might be something in Judaism, a Torah that you enjoy studying, that you really deeply... I'm talking about something you deeply care about. Maybe it's your relationship with your spouse or kids or whatever it might be. Maybe it's a project of volunteering that you... Whatever you have, think about your most passionate area in life. And I guarantee you that passion has adversity. Maybe internal adversity, maybe external adversity, but sometimes it feels like an uphill battle. And sometimes you don't notice or care that it's difficult because you're so passionate. The challenges just don't matter. That's what caring does. Moshe expected them to care so much about how beautiful this land is, not just physically, but spiritually as well. Okay, so there's difficult people there. We'll work on it. We'll figure it out. Because when you have a reason, a meaningful reason, things become easier. Things become more meaningful. I'll give you a very extreme example. This is really extreme, but it still rings loudly. Talk to any Holocaust survivor. That's a challenge. Surviving the Holocaust, surviving death camps and concentration camps. Ask them how they survived. Are they going to be able to tell you how they survived? What they did to survive? They all have miracle stories. Ask them why they survived. They could tell you why. Because when you have a meaningful reason, when there's something positive there, the challenges become more manageable, more doable. What's that line from Viktor Frankl? Anybody who has a why can bury any how, or something like that? You know, I like the idea, if there's a will, there's a way. So Moshe expected them to see the beauty of the land. And again, not just the physical beauty of the land, but the spiritual beauty of the land. And part of that is our mission and purpose in being there. And if they see that, all of a sudden the challenges, I'm not saying they go away, but they become worth it. But they came back sharing all the challenges, as if those challenges weren't worth it. Because they were so harped on the negativity, these spies. And Korach noticed this. Korach noticed the mistake these spies made. And he decided, let's take the opposite extreme. When I approach people, I don't want to know the bad. I want to know their true value. I want to know their inherent value. And I want to know that they're valuable, independent of anything they do. Because they were part of the chosen people at Mount Sinai. They're holy. That's it. It literally says this in the Torah. Korach literally says to Moshe, he gathers all the people against Moshe and Aaron, and he says to them, you guys are too much. The whole congregation is holy. God is among all of them. Why do you exalt yourself upon the congregation of God? Why the hierarchy of a Moshe who's leading the Jewish people, of an Aaron who's representing the service of the Jewish people, and the Cohen and the Levi and the diversity, the disparity, the differences? And you're great because you do this, and you're great because you do that. Bro, we were all at Mount Sinai. We're all Jews. We all have a soul. We're all created in the image of God. Korach has a very good point. A very good point. And his point came in perfect timing. The commentaries point out that he's had this complaint for a long time, but the whole saga of the spies was really a perfect time to voice his concern and actually rile people up. Again, the way he did this wasn't the most respectful. But he realized, at this point, the spies saw the negativity. Despite there being positivity, I'm going to see this positivity despite there being negativity. And if that's the case, God is among all of us. Then why the diversity and the disparity? This opens up a very big can of worms. In other words, what Korach is essentially asking or challenging Moshe, because we're about to, again, what's Moshe doing? And you see this more clearly in the book of Deuteronomy. But you see this throughout the Torah. As we're traveling throughout the desert, and Moshe is guiding us as we're getting closer and closer and closer to the land, and yes, we have a 40-year setback since last week's Parsha, Moshe is dropping more and more mitzvahs on us. And Korach would be thinking, well, what are these mitzvahs? What do you mean, a connection to God? So you're telling me more mitzvahs means greater connection. Aren't we all connected? Don't we all have souls? You're trying to lead us into this land so we can do more mitzvahs. We're all already connected to God. What do we need more mitzvahs for? More Torah for? More good deeds for? We're connected already. He's not wrong. And this opens up a very important philosophical question that several places in Hasidic teaching addresses, which is, if your soul is one with God, and just recognizing that soul is essentially recognizing God, the part of you that's created in the image of God, then what do you need mitzvahs for? Why should you try so hard to daven and pray and get inspired and do if you can just be? Put a little bit differently, why don't we just have Shabbos the whole week? Shabbos is when we're not doing, we're being. Right? That's what Shabbos is. Shabbos, we're being holy. During the week, we do holy things. We do mitzvahs during the week. Shabbos, you don't put on tefillin. You sit back, and the big focus of Shabbos is not doing. There's things we don't do. Just don't get in the way. Just experience. Experience the holiness. Why can't we just do that, like, for the rest of our lives? We are going to do that when Mashiach comes. We're going to focus on being, not just doing. Maybe Korach was ahead of his times. Maybe he was a little bit more ready for Mashiach than his senses were allowing him to be. But Korach is asking a very important question that we need to ask ourselves. What is the purpose of mitzvahs? If I'm already holy, if I'm already connected with God, if I already have a soul. What is the value of my actions if the connection is inherent? How can you earn connection if you can't lose connection? These are good questions. These are very important questions. Korach was missing something. What was Korach missing? You can't just be holy. You have to do. You have to become. Because yes, we have a soul, and yes, by default, we're connected. But God is a creator. And as created in his image, we have creative ability. And what God wants us to do is to create connection, to create a relationship with him in a paradigm, in a space where it seems least obvious. It's very obvious to have a connection to God with my soul by default without having to do anything, just by being. It's very unobvious to channel God on a Zoom call like we are right now, or on YouTube for those who are watching right now. It's an unobvious thing. That creates effort, that creates work, that creates us generating it instead of it happening by default. In other words, to be, which is what Shabbos is, happens by default. Shabbos comes when it comes, whether you're ready or not. But the doing, the welcoming God into our world on a very detailed level. And the reason why I say detailed level is because mitzvahs are so detailed, are so nitty-gritty. I mean, there's pages and pages discussing details of every mitzvah. I mean, think of tefillin. When to put on tefillin, when not to put on tefillin, what color does tefillin need to be? They need to be black, but how do you define black versus brown, and where do you draw the line? And when? I mean, there could be so many details to every single mitzvah. Because God wants to manifest within the details of our life, but he wants us to welcome him. On the terms of this world. And in order to do that, You have to be able to succeed. In order to succeed, you have to be able to fail. You have to be able to have the potential to neglect the mitzvah, to neglect an opportunity to welcome God in your life. In order for a relationship to be truly meaningful, you have to be able to lose it to earn it. You see a similar idea, by the way, in the Torah. At the beginning of the Torah, during creation. After each day of creation, God said, let there be light. There was light. It was good. V'haya ki tov, it was good. And after every day of creation, God said it was good. After the creation of Adam and Eve, God said it was very good. Why is that day very good? That was like the worst day in history. Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. They've literally not just got themselves driven out of the Garden of Eden, but they've changed the world. They've made a world a very self-conscious, self-oriented place by that indulgence, to the point that their first reaction was, let's put on clothing. They felt themselves. They didn't feel their souls anymore. It was like the seeds of exile, even though we weren't technically a people yet. But this is where it all started from. Why is that good? Why is that day very good? And the reason is because that was the day that humans learned they are consequential, that they actually mean something. And if that they could mess up catastrophically, they could succeed astronomically. A number of years ago, when we were living in Crown Heights, we were newlyweds, I bumped into a friend who I haven't seen in a while, and he was going through a difficult time in his Judaism, in his connection to Judaism, his connection with God. He was going through his journey, trying to figure it out. And he's living in Crown Heights in Brooklyn in this Hasidic community, and did not feel like he had a shul to go to. He didn't feel, he just wasn't, he was going through his moment and just didn't feel like he was part of a community. So he wouldn't go to shul. So I invited him to come to the shul that I was praying at. And turns out that was a mistake. Because this was a no talking shul, and this guy loved to talk. And what I mean by no talking shul is that there's like, I don't even know what I was doing there, by the way. Okay. But some shuls have an unofficial shusher. And this guy was a little chatty. And the rabbi, this was awkward. The rabbi came to him and politely asked him to, please tone it down a little bit, But again, he hasn't been in a shul for a long time. Maybe he was antsy, whatever. I'm not judging. But he kept talking. And I don't know. I guess he didn't hit it off with this rabbi. This is a beautiful rabbi. There's a reason I'm telling you this story. There's no judgment on either party here. But the rabbi got a little trigger happy. Nobody's perfect. He got a little trigger happy and lost it on the guy. This guy was very uncomfortable. And needless to say, the assumption was that's not the shul he's coming back to. The next week, Friday night, I come into shul and he's there. And we're like, what? Even the rabbi came up to him. The rabbi apologized to him, like, I think he's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, you're welcome here. But like, nobody expected him to come back. This is a guy who hasn't been going to shul for a long time. Hasn't really been engaged the way he should have been for a long time. And the rabbi says, what are you doing here? He says, I realized how relevant I was, how consequential I was. It's not every day I found myself in a place where my talking actually mattered. Mattered in a negative way, but it mattered. And if it mattered in a negative way, it can matter in a positive way. Our sins matter to God, our mitzvahs matter just as much to God. Like they're relevant. They welcome God into this world. And with that comes a relationship with God that is very individualized, very personal. Korach didn't see it that way. Korach was just looking straight at the soul, saying, you're connected to God. Why do we have to start doing things? And he was willing to fight for that philosophy. If only he realized how much we mattered and learned to appreciate that, yes, a collective relationship with God, an inherent relationship with God that we have automatically is important, but an individual, personal relationship with God is just as important. I go back to the marriage example because I think it just fits so well. A couple we're inherently connected. We got married. We committed to each other. That's great. But they should actually make the relationship personal. They should actually be able to say why they feel invested in this relationship on a very personal level, why this is meaningful to me as well. Not just because, well, I committed. I don't know. And that comes with a potential for hurt. It comes for a potential for depth. There's vulnerability there. And Korach didn't have the ability to see that. And he was willing to fight for that. Rashi tells us something interesting. Rashi quotes a medrash that says that Korach tried quoting two different, tried challenging Moshe, offering this theological challenge to Moshe, using two examples from the Torah. Example number one, Korach said, Moshe, a house full of Jewish books, there's no would it need a mezuzah or not? Expecting Moshe to say, of course it wouldn't. A mezuzah is 2 paragraphs from the Torah. If you have a whole house of Torah, what do you need a mezuzah for? And Moses wouldn't accept it. No, even that house needs a mezuzah. Korach says, Moshe, a talis, a shawl, not the fringes, right? A shawl is supposed to have fringes on it, a talis on it, tzitzis on it, sorry. That tzitzis is supposed to have a strand of tchelis, of wool, of blue wool, which we don't have anymore. And he says, what if the whole garment is made out of wool, or out of that blue wool, out of tchelis? You shouldn't need fringes. It's one big fringe. Moshe, again, wouldn't accept it. No. You still need fringes. And the way this argument is understood, a lot of commentaries try to interpret what this midrash is talking about. What was Korach trying to metaphorically convey? But one of the things he was trying to say was, you have a relationship with God that surrounds you and encompasses you. The Jewish books are all around you. And Moshe says, details, man. On your doorpost, there's 2 paragraphs. Those are details. And you could do it right and you could do it wrong. It could be a kosher mezuzah, it could be an unkosher mezuzah. You could succeed and you could mess up. You're consequential, you matter. The talis, it encompasses me, it wraps me up. What do I need the fringes? Details, man. Those fringes remind us of the 613 details that God wants. And in a relationship, details are important. Because details means we notice. We notice not just, oh, we're connected, which is a very vague thing. I notice what's important to you. You notice what's important to me on a very detailed level. And this is what Korach was missing. He wasn't getting it. He just wasn't getting it. That people matter, and the details, the small things that they do matter. Okay, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.